Picture this. It's a bitterly cold morning, January 20th, 1046 BC. The sun is just starting to rise over the frozen plains of ancient China. And on this field, two massive armies are staring each other down. On one side, you've got the mighty Shang Dynasty. They've been in charge for over 600 years. Their power seems unbreakable. And on the other, a scrappy coalition of rebels. They're outnumbered, but they are absolutely driven by a belief that heaven itself has told them to get rid of a tyrant. In just one day, an entire empire is going to crumble, and the very idea of what it means to have power is going to be rewritten forever. Right, so what happened at the Battle of Muye was so much more than just a fight. It was a moment that would define a civilization. This was the bloody birth of a brand new idea. That the right to rule isn't just something you're born with, it's something you have to earn through being a good leader. And let me tell you, that idea was so powerful, it would end up shaping Chinese history for the next 3,000 years. So let's dig into how this single battle completely changed the game. All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get to know the two kings at the center of this whole thing. Then we'll follow their armies as they head for a collision course. We'll get right into the thick of the Battle of Muye itself, and then we'll unpack the revolutionary idea that came out of it all. And finally, we'll look at why this one single day in history still has such a huge impact, even now. To really get the Battle of Muye, you have to start with the two men at the heart of it all. You've got the supreme ruler and his most powerful subject. And at its core, this whole conflict was really a clash between two totally different ways of thinking about what it means to be a leader. So this whole thing really boils down to these two guys. On one side, you've got Dai, who history remembers as King Zhou of Shang. He was convinced his right to rule was absolute, a divine gift he was born with. Then, on the other side, there's King Wen of the Zhou, technically a vassal to the Shang king. And their styles? Polar opposites. The Shang king was cruel, Wen was known for being just. Dai was all about excess and waste, Wen was careful and prudent. King Zhou demanded you obey him, King Wen earned your respect. I mean, the stories about King Zhou's depravity are truly legendary. Ancient texts describe a guy so obsessed with luxury that his court became this playground of horrors. He literally built pools filled with wine and hung roasted meat from trees so people could just gorge themselves. But it wasn't just indulgence, it got dark. He and his consort, Daji, apparently invented sadistic tortures just for fun, like forcing prisoners to walk across a heated, oiled bronze pole until they fell into burning coals below. This wasn't just bad leadership, it was a moral rot that was eating away at his dynasty from the inside out. So, as the Shang court is rotting from within, the Zhou state out in the west is quietly getting stronger and building a really good reputation. The injustice coming from King Zhao's capital was creating a powder keg. And, well, one paranoid move was all it took to light the fuse and set off this impossible, world-changing march. So the breaking point? It came when a paranoid King Zhou got spooked by King Wen's growing popularity and had him arrested and thrown in prison. Now, Wen was eventually released, but the damage was done. It proved that in the Shang court, being a good and virtuous leader was actually seen as a threat. After King Wen died, the mission fell to his son, King Wu. Wu was bolder, more decisive, but he waited until his advisors saw signs in the heavens that they believed meant heaven itself was ready for a change. So, in the dead of winter, 1046 BC, he made a huge gamble. He decided to march on the capital, using the frozen rivers and snowy landscape to hide his army for a surprise attack. Now, King Wu didn't march alone. No way. His call to arms was answered by all sorts of people who had suffered under the Shang. This wasn't just a Zhou army. You had young warriors and skilled Shu archers coming down from the mountains. You had fierce Jiang horsemen joining the ranks. In total, 8 allied groups came together, creating this diverse but totally unified force. And they weren't bound by fear or pay. They were bound by a shared belief that it was time to put an end to this corrupt dynasty. And so, after a brutal winter march, the Zhou coalition shows up at the plains of Muye, just south of the Shang capital. It's here, on this massive, frozen field, that the fate of China is about to be decided in one single, epic showdown. Just look at these numbers. On paper, this should have been an absolute slaughter. King Wu's coalition had about 50,000 soldiers. King Zhao, even though his main armies were off fighting somewhere else, scraped together a force of about 170,000 to defend his capital. The Zhou were outnumbered more than 3-1. This was a textbook David versus Goliath situation. But as any great general will tell you,
The true strength of an army isn't about how many people you have. It's about heart. And the heart of the Shang army? It was fatally weak.
This chart right here shows you the real balance of power. The Zhou army was made up of volunteers, people who believed in their cause. They were fighting for something. King Zhou's army, though, it was mostly made up of resentful slaves and prisoners of war. Men who'd been dragged from their homes, treated terribly, and then handed a weapon and told to die for the very tyrant who enslaved them. They had every reason to hate their king, and absolutely zero reason to fight for him.
So the battle itself was shockingly fast. King Wu gives this powerful speech, saying this isn't a rebellion, this is us carrying out heaven's will. Then his disciplined chariots and infantry charge. And what happened next? Well, it's the turning point of Chinese history. The armed slaves on the Shang front lines didn't just run, they turned. Some just dropped their weapons. Others actually turned around and attacked their own Shang officers, joining the Zhou charge. It was less of a battle and more of a mass uprising. Panic just rips through the Shang army, and this massive force just dissolves. King Zhou, watching his entire empire collapse right in front of him, turns and flees back to his palace. For the few Shang troops who actually stayed loyal and fought, the end was brutal. Ancient poems describe this incredibly ferocious clash, which is a grim reminder that even a just war is still a bloody one. The rout was total, and the 600-year-old Shang dynasty was shattered in just a few hours. Okay, so the battle is won, but the war for legitimacy, that was just getting started. The Zhou couldn't just be seen as conquerors. They had to be seen as liberators, as the rightful inheritors of power. And to do that, they basically had to rewrite the rules of the entire universe. To justify what they'd done, the Zhou introduced this revolutionary new concept, the mandate of heaven. Think of it like the divine right to rule, but with a huge catch. It's not permanent. Heaven gives the mandate to a ruler who is just and good, but if that ruler, or their family, becomes corrupt and tyrannical, heaven takes its support away, which basically gives the green light for rebellion to restore order. It was the perfect philosophical excuse for their victory. They weren't usurpers, they were instruments of cosmic justice. Meanwhile, the last Shan king performs his final, defiant act. He's cornered in his palace, he knows it's all over, so he puts on his most valuable ceremonial jades, walks to his beloved Deer Terrace Pavilion, the very symbol of his extravagance, and sets it on fire. He chose to die in a blaze of his own making, which is a fittingly dramatic end for a king whose entire reign was defined by destructive excess. King Wu, on the other hand, entered the capital not as a destroyer, but as a stabilizer. His first moves were incredibly smart. He declared the founding of the new Zhou dynasty. And then, crucially, he opened up the imperial granaries to feed the population that had been starving under King Zhou's neglect. Instead of a bloody purge, he offered amnesty and even government jobs to many of the old Shang officials, absorbing their bureaucracy to make sure the transition of power was smooth. The victory at Muye was so much more than just a change in management. The events of that one day would echo down through thousands of years, fundamentally shaping Chinese political thought, its culture, and the very identity of the nation itself. And the result of this victory? Incredible stability. The Zhou dynasty, which was born from this violent rebellion, would end up lasting for nearly 800 years. That makes it the longest and one of the most foundational dynasties in all of Chinese history. It really laid the groundwork for everything that came after. So why does all this matter? What's the big takeaway? Well, the Battle of Muye established the mandate of heaven, an idea that would be used to explain the rise and fall of dynasties for the next 3,000 years. It created this powerful idea that rebellion isn't always treason. Sometimes it's a moral duty. And, get this, bronze artifacts made after the victory contain the first known use of the phrase zhonggua, or central state, the very name China uses for itself today. This victory wasn't just the start of a new dynasty. It was the beginning of how China saw itself as a single unified civilization. Which leaves us with one final kind of ironic thought. The Zhou created the mandate of heaven to justify their own rise to power, but in doing so, they planted the seeds for their own eventual downfall. By arguing that power is conditional, that it has to be earned, they created a system where no rule could ever be truly absolute or permanent. It's a question that has haunted rulers ever since. If your power is just a mandate from heaven, what happens when heaven decides to change its mind?